So I picked up 3 job descriptions recently from LinkedIn. One is a procurement manager job at Microsoft in Atlanta, US. The second one is a procurement manager job at Amazon in Bangalore, India. And the third one is also a procurement manager job at Elite Cars in Dubai. Now these 3 jobs are in 3 different countries, in 3 different industries, but because they are all procurement manager jobs, they all have these common technical and human skills that you see on your screen. And in this video, I will cover with you the top questions that come in any procurement manager interview in the areas of strategy and leadership, operational and tactical, analytical and technical, and situational and behavioral questions. My name is Jamil Hai, and I've been working in supply chain management positions across South Asia, Middle East, and North America for the last 2 decades. And my mission is to help you build real life skills for your job and career that they don't teach you in college. And now I'm also offering 2 different types of coaching sessions which you can book by clicking on the link on my LinkedIn profile. The first is a 30-minute supply chain career guidance session where you can ask me questions like how to build your network in supply chain, general discussion on supply chain and leadership positions, career guidance, growing within your company, and job search in general. And the second one is a supply chain job interview preparation session, which will be extremely helpful for you if you are preparing for an upcoming supply chain job interview, because in that case, I will book a 1-hour session with you and you will send me your resume, the job description that you are applying for, so that I can give you very specific laser guided advice on how to maximize your chances of success. So go ahead today and book your next session. So first, let's look at the strategic and leadership questions. The first common question that comes in this area is, how do you align procurement strategies with overall business objectives? Now, while answering this question, you need to consider 3 things. Number 1 is, how have your procurement strategies in the past aligned with the business goals? How did you align those strategies with your stakeholders? And finally, and most importantly, show some real examples on what was the value proposition, what were the hard savings your strategies delivered in your previous experience. Now let's talk about the business goals first. Every company uses a different set of business strategy frameworks. Some companies use OGSM, some companies use the ANSOFFMATRIX, named after the famous Russian strategist Igor Ansoff, who is also known as the father of strategic management. Some companies use the BCGMatrix, which is known after the famous Boston Consulting Group consulting firm. Some companies may use the 7S model, balanced scorecard model, or something which has been more recently adopted by a lot of companies is the blue ocean strategy model, which is a concept very well explained in this book called The Blue Ocean Strategy, which is a fantastic read. So depending on whatever strategy your previous employer was using, try to link your past procurement strategy examples to those specific business strategy frameworks. Secondly, when you talk about stakeholder alignment, talk about how did you go about getting the whole organization on board in terms of implementing your procurement strategy. Getting the buy-in, especially from senior stakeholders in a procurement manager job, is critical, because sometimes you may have critics who might criticize your policy, but if you have gone through the steps of aligning the key stakeholders, and you don't have to align the whole organization, you just need to align the key decision makers. Typically, these are your CFO, your CEO, or your president, and a few other key players in the operational functional departments, and try to demonstrate how you got that alignment in the past. And lastly, and most importantly, what was the value proposition? Nothing speaks louder than hard saving numbers your procurement strategy delivered. So try to talk about some of the hard savings you delivered in the past as a procurement manager, because those numbers will go a long way to build the credibility of your answers. The next question that can come in the strategic and leadership area is, how do you measure the performance of your procurement team? Now, while answering this question, you may want to think about the 6-box framework in how you measure the performance of your procurement team. These 6 boxes are cost KPIs, where you talk about the total cost of ownership, which is a concept I'm going to talk later in this video, so watch till the end. Percentage spend management via procurement, so what percentage of the total organization spend is managed by procurement. Cost savings that you have delivered via procurement, which is the hard savings I talked about earlier. In the second box, you would look at the supplier performance KPIs. So things like on-time delivery percentage, quality defects from the supplier, supplier responsiveness. The third bucket is risk management KPIs. So things like supplier risk assessment, disruption management, or business continuity planning. This has become very important, especially after COVID, when supply disruption was all over the place and every company started focusing on building contingencies. And this is where the role of procurement managers became very, very critical, because now, more than the cost sometimes, what the companies have learned is that building that contingency to provide continuity to your supply chain is very important. Imagine you are a manufacturer of a food product and you only have one supplier of, let's say, corn, right? And then that supplier goes bankrupt or some kind of disruption happens, maybe natural disaster or whatever, and then that supplier is gone. Your entire supply chain is completely at risk and your production can stop, your factories can stop, you will go out of stock. So in that particular case, the job of a procurement manager is to have a very solid backup plan so that if one supplier goes out, they can immediately shift to the next one and so on. These things sometimes are costly, but at the end of the day, they ensure business continuity, which is extremely important. The next bucket, which is very important nowadays, is the sustainability KPIs. So how do you measure the percentage of purchases from sustainable suppliers, CO2 impact of your procurement initiatives, because a lot of companies have got goals like by 2030, 2050, there will be zero carbon emissions and those kind of things. And therefore, this KPI becomes very important in procurement roles. The next bucket is the efficiency KPIs. So what's your procurement cycle time? What's your contract compliance and so on? And finally, and perhaps most importantly, is how do you measure your team engagement? In that case, you could refer to the Gallup Q12 structure, where there are these 12 Gallup questions that you ask every year to your employees or to your team, and you try to gauge their engagement and how excited they are about working in your organization. So you could use that framework or any other framework that your company's HR department uses. Now let's move to the operational and tactical questions bucket. The first question that can come in this space is, can you outline your procurement process from sourcing to payment? Now, when the recruiter is asking this question, they are basically trying to gauge your knowledge and command on the famous P2P or procure to pay process. Now, the procure to pay process, just to give you a very high level overview, basically starts from requirements planning. Then you go to the RFQ or the request for quotation stage. Then you create the purchase order, goods receipt, manage invoices, and process payments. And of course, this is a cyclical process. So every company uses this process in some shape or form. Some companies may have a few more steps added to it. Some companies may have a few steps less. But in general, this is the procure to pay process. So if this question comes in your job interview, try to give this overview and try to demonstrate your command over this. You may want to talk about, let's say, if you have experience with SAPAriba, talk about the procure to pay module within SAPAriba, which will then give also the recruiter the confidence that, okay, you know not only how the P2P process works, but you also know how it works in a specific software environment. The next question that you can expect in the operational and tactical space is, how do you evaluate supplier performance and select the best suppliers? Now, in this case, you can refer to some of the supplier dashboards or supplier scorecards you may have created in the past. I'm sure most procurement managers do have something like this, which you see on your screen right now, where they would evaluate their suppliers on things like cost, quality, on-time delivery. Now, a lot of them also have sustainability and those kind of aspects, similar to the 6-box model that I showed you. So in the same way, you would also evaluate your suppliers. So you can refer to some of your prior experience implementing dashboards like that, and also refer to some of the meetings you had with your suppliers where you assess them based on the metrics shown in the dashboard. Now let's move to the next bucket, which is technical and analytical questions. The first question that can come in this space is, what experience do you have with procurement software? Now, in this case, you should talk about the procurement software that you have used in the past in your previous employers and whatever experience you have. Now, some of the most commonly known or widely used procurement software, of course, are SAPAriba, Oracle Procurement Cloud, Coupa, GEP. These are the big ones, but I'm sure there are other procurement software out there as well. So whatever software you have used in the past, you can talk about your experience with that. And if you have got any specific experience of implementing that software or upgrading that software or training people on that software, talk a lot about that, because that's the kind of experience people are looking for, that not only your experience in using a software like this, but also your ability to improve or implement the software, because that shows the ability for you to drive a change or to train people, which are all the attributes a recruiter would look for in a good procurement manager. The next question is, can you explain the concept of total cost of ownership? Now, this is rather an elementary question, but it can come in a procurement manager's job interview. And just to explain at a very high level, total cost of ownership is a very common concept in the world of purchasing. The best way to explain this in a very easy way is, if you are buying a car, you don't just look at the price of the car, because that's just the tip of the iceberg. What you need to look at is, on top of the purchase price, what are the other costs that add up to your total cost of ownership of that car? Things like fuel cost, insurance cost, resale value, repairs and maintenance. And that's where, when you start comparing cars, you imagine when you are buying a car for yourself, you are like a mini purchasing manager or a procurement manager as well, right? Because you are going out with some money and you are trying to find whether you should buy a Toyota or a Honda or a Mercedes or an Audi or whatever. And as you will compare these different models and the type of car you're looking for, you will just not compare them on the price tag. Because you may buy a cheaper car, but if it's not good on mileage, then you will be spending a lot of money on fuel. Or you might be buying a very cheap car, but then if it's very expensive on maintenance, then your total cost of ownership goes up as well. So that's like the concept of TCO in a nutshell. And if you are a procurement manager in an organization, then of course you will be looking at similar things when you are, let's say, purchasing a software on behalf of a company. So in that case, you will look at things like purchase price, the security cost, the cost of training. Now, security cost is very important in the world of software, because nowadays with the frequency of cyber attacks and the technology which these cyber attackers are using, the importance of security has become extremely high. So sometimes if you are procuring a software, you may not even buy a software if you have doubts about the security aspect of that software. So therefore, it becomes a very important piece in your total cost of ownership, because if you're spending too much money in making the software secure, and even if it's a cheaper price tag, your TCO will go up. Similarly, you will look at things like the training costs, the repairs and maintenance cost of that software, the upgrading cost, the service cost, and the support structure. What kind of support cost model is the vendor offering you? So those are the kind of things when you look at the total cost of ownership. So as a procurement manager, it's very important that you have awareness of how this model works. And then in your job interview, you should talk about some real life examples of how you have used this concept to make your procurement decisions in the past. Now let's move to the final and my favorite types of questions, which are situational and behavioral questions. Now, I've mentioned this in a lot of different videos, that these questions, when you have to answer them, the best model to use is the STAR model, the situation, task, action, and results model, which if you don't know what the STAR model is, you can watch my video by clicking on the link over here, where I have explained the STAR model in a lot of details. So when you are asked any situational or behavioral question in your procurement manager job interview, try to answer those questions with the STAR model as well. Now, what are the different types of situational and behavioral questions that can come in this job interview? Let's find them out. So you could be asked questions like, describe a time when you had to deal with a very difficult supplier. This is very similar to what I've covered in the supply planner job interview in the past, which you can watch by clicking over here, where I've talked about, tell me about a time when you had to work with a very difficult customer. So in a very similar way, they are asking with you about the supplier. So once again, you use the STAR model to give the situation, task, action, and results, and how did you manage that situation. Other questions that can come in this space are, how do you handle a situation where there is a difficult conflict between procurement and another department? Tell me about a time when you had to make a quick decision under pressure. How do you prioritize tasks and manage your time effectively? what motivates you to succeed in a procurement manager role. So all of these things are very behavioral, very situational questions. So the best model is to use the STAR model. And if you have got any questions about implementing the STAR model, always reach out to me on LinkedIn or post your question in the comments box of this video. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I've also made videos on topics like how to prepare for a supply planning manager job interview and how to prepare for a demand planning manager job interview, which you can watch by clicking over here. Keep watching.